In this video, we will cover adjusting the position of linked files and managing linked files. When setting up an MEP project, one of the first things you will do is link the architectural model, and then create levels in the host model to match the levels in the linked architectural model. Or you can use the Copy Monitor tool to copy and monitor levels in the linked architectural model. Another thing you'll want to do is pin the linked model so that it doesn't accidentally move. To do that, you first need to select the link. And if you can't select it, then the first thing I would recommend checking is the Select Links selection option. In this case, it's disabled. When I enable it, I can then select the link. With the link selected, I'll drag it to move it. If you accidentally move it, then you may get a warning, which in this case I did because I'm monitoring the levels in the link, but you may not if you weren't, and then you may not know that it moved. In this case, we can select the link and then right-click and use one of the reposition options. And so if you do notice that a linked model has moved, you can use one of these reposition options. This model was linked using the internal origin to internal origin positioning option, and so we can select reposition to internal origin to move it back. Once again, we get a warning stating that the link has moved. If you use the incorrect positioning option, you could also right-click and then reposition it as needed. With the link selected, I'll click Pin in the contextual ribbon to pin the link. Also, be aware that there is a Select Pinned Elements selection option, and since that is disabled, I cannot select the link, so I'll need to enable that along with Select Links so that I can select the linked model. Also, be aware that there is a Revit Links branch in the project browser, and you can see any of your linked Revit models. In this case, we can see the link that we have, and you can right-click the link and access various options. You can also use the Manage Links dialog to manage the link. When you switch to the Manage ribbon, and then in the Manage Project panel, click Manage Links. Here on the Revit tab, you can see any of the Revit or all of the Revit links that you have. In this case, we just have one. And you can select it and you can unload it. So if you no longer want to see it, but you want to keep the link, you can use unload, and then you can reload it or reload it from another location. I'll click reload. And be aware that if you are working in a work shared project, you would actually have two unload options. You could unload it just for you, and the option would say unload for me, or you could unload it for all users. And so this is beneficial when you're working with a large project team and maybe only a handful of people need to use the link. If you want to remove the link altogether, you could use the remove option, and then there would be no reload. You can reload. You'd have to use the link Revit tool to relink it. So that's if you wanted to remove it altogether. You can use Add to add additional Revit links while you're in the Manage Links dialog. Continuing on, you can control the reference type, and that can be overlay or attachment. And what this does is it will actually control how the link will appear when the host model is linked to another project. So in this case, what the reference type would do would control how the architectural link would appear when the Manage Links exercise file was linked to another project. When it's set to overlay, it will not appear. So in other words, if somebody links the Manage Links exercise file, then this architectural link would not appear. If it was set to attachment, then it would. And so this is something you need to be aware of when you have a linked architectural model, because the architect would typically have several other models linked to it. For example, they'll likely have the structural model linked, And so if the structural model was linked to the architectural model as an attachment, then you would see it in your model when you linked the architectural model. And so then if you linked the structural model, you would essentially have two of them. Also, you would see that in the under Revit links in the project browser, you would see the a listing of any other models that were set to attachment. They would appear underneath there. Additionally, you can control the path type. So when it's set to relative, then it's going to be looking in the same folder as your host model, or if it's set to absolute, then it's looking for an absolute file path. Okay, I'll click OK to close the Manage Links dialog, and we'll wrap up by discussing shared coordinates. So as mentioned, this model was linked using the internal origin to internal origin positioning option, and then to match up the shared coordinates, we can acquire those coordinates. And you can use the tool on the Manage ribbon in the Project Location panel, and then expand the Coordinates button and select Acquire Coordinates. And then, with the tool active, you simply select the link that you want to acquire the coordinates from. In this case, we get a dialog stating that the Acquire Coordinates process was successful. And so I'll click Close, and now at this point, the internal origins match and the shared coordinate systems match. And so that will help keep things aligned as the project progresses and will help during coordination. And so it's always important to be aware of the positioning and the coordinates that are being used.